My name's Kurt, and I'm an alcoholic. Wait, that's the wrong meeting. My name's Kurt. I'm Chief Community and Communications Officer for Monty Program. Monty Program is the corporate sponsor of the MariaDB project, and I'm here to let you know what we've been doing with MariaDB, what sort of features you can find in our current releases, why you might find those features compelling. Before I start, I don't want to assume that everybody knows what MariaDB is and what the ethos behind the project is and how it works. So I'm going to give you like the super fast MariaDB in like 2 to 5 minute overview. I'm going to assume that everybody made it today because they're literate. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading that for you. But that's pulled right from the MariaDB website. Sort of gives you a broad overview of what the project is, why it was founded, how we work, what we do, what we create. But let's get into a little more detail. You know, what does this actually mean? What does this paragraph actually tell you? So MariaDB is an Oracle MySQL downstream, much like Percona Server. We fork the Oracle public community server edition of MySQL every once in a while. We then dance on that software for 6-8 months, a year or so, and release what we call MariaDB. That makes it a drop-in replacement for MySQL. Our goal is to make it possible for you to stop MySQLD on your server, install MariaDB from source, from your package manager, from binary downloads. Start MariaDB, and it reads your existing my.conf, it reads your existing data sets, and just functions exactly as you would expect MySQL to function. Everything we do is public. There is no private development channel somewhere that you have to be in some secret club. Our work log is public, so you can see what we're working on and what we're prioritizing. All of our source code repositories are open. You can pull any file from any piece of any source tree that we use. There's no commercial version with a separate source tree you can't see. Our bug tracking is all public. I'll pick on Oracle here a bit. Up until 3-4 months ago, Oracle could say that all of their bug tracking was public. That's not true anymore. If you're an Oracle MySQL customer, you report bugs you find into a private internal Oracle-only bug tracker, which means that if you're a MySQL developer or if you work in the MySQL ecosystem developing plugins or storage engines or things like that, you go to the Oracle bug tracker, you can't be sure you're seeing all the bugs. Our bug tracker is 100% open. If it's reported, everyone can see it. Our mailing lists are all open. All of our IRC channels are open. Those are located on Freenode. We have a Knowledgebase. All of that is open. Anyone can contribute to that, ask questions, actually contribute content and write articles. Our build system is entirely open as well. You can run a build instance on your own hardware and pull down nightly builds of MariaDB, have them built automatically on your own hardware, and stage them to a testing server. So you can watch as dailies progress and decide whether or not you want to switch, and if so, when. We have decades of combined developer experience in the company. Obviously, Monty Program was founded by Monty Videnius, the original author of MySQL. I don't think anyone has more development experience than he does, considering he started the project. As Peter indicated in his keynote, if you were here for that, we've got a lot of the old optimizer team. Igor Babayev, Timur Kachunov, Sanya Bielkin. A lot of the optimizer team from the MySQL and Sundays now works for Monty Program. So we've done a lot of improvements to the optimizer, and as Peter said, sometimes those result in queries running up to 10 times faster. Our licensing is 100% free. We make all of our best work available to everybody under the same free, unrestricted terms. There's no enterprise edition that you have to pay for that gets you this feature or that feature that's not available in the community edition. So we're 100% free licensed, and that license is the GPL version 2. We ask that contributors contribute code either under the GPL v2 or under a BSD license. If neither of those appeal to you, we have something called the MCA, the Monty Contributor Agreement, which basically has you assign equal copyright to Monty programs so that we can then license it as GPL v2. So it is free with a capital F licensing. And if it wasn't, Richard Stallman's radar would be going off right now, and he'd come bursting through that door with his head on fire and up on this stage and beating me with a stick. So we are a free replacement for MySQL. Which leads us to, well, what are we? Are we a branch of MySQL? Are we just taking MySQL and making small changes to it? We certainly do that. Or are we a fork like Drizzle? There are things we do that are very, very much outside the realm of MySQL. For instance, we don't include InnoDB. If you use InnoDB in MariaDB, you'll be using Percona's ExtraDB replacement for InnoDB. So you have InnoDB functionality, but that makes us kind of more a fork than a branch. So we get this question all the time, are we a branch or a fork? And I've decided that we're a bork. Monty does speak Swedish, so that's actually somewhat applicable. And I've just put the ball on the tee for everybody saying this project is borked. So that's with an O, not a 0, so we're not borked. Our current releases, sadly the title on the slides are kind of obfuscated by those lights, but we have 2 current releases that are out in production as release quality, the 5.1 series and the 5.2 series. The 5.1 series had its first release in November of 2009 after about 8 months of the company being in business. It took us 8 months to get us to a release quality MariaDB. We continue to update the 5.1 branch of MariaDB, and we just released our latest on the 1st of March. MariaDB 5.1 is based on MySQL 5.1. So you can expect, we try to keep version numbers sane. We have to deviate from that somewhat. You'll see why in a few minutes. The 5.2 series, also based on that's based on MariaDB 5.1, so by extension it's based on MySQL 5.1 as well. The first release of 5.2 was in November of last year. The latest release was just a couple weeks ago. We dropped 5.2.6. These are current releases. They are available now. You can get them as binaries from our download site, or depending on the speed at which your distribution package managers get things into releases, you may be able to find that in package management now. I can't speak for every distro or BSD ports and package trees. We also have 2 development branches currently underway. We have the 5.3.5 series. Monty will tell you that's going to be released as gamma quality, beta quality anytime now. My colleague Colin and I are somewhat less optimistic. As you see, the last bullet point I have there is beta cycle during Q2. I think that may be reasonable, that we'll be into a beta cycle by the end of June, but don't hold me to it. We release code when it's ready. We're not going to leave you hanging and say, oh, no, it's not ready and we have to fix every tiny, but we're not going to, we'll release things with a couple known issues here and there if they're not going to impact a large number of users. Those will be very clearly delineated in release notes so you'll know what you're getting into. We won't hold up the entire community for problems that are going to affect 2% of users. On the other hand, we're not going to release code just to get another point release bump, you know, and a bump in the blogosphere and have everybody screaming at us because we released, we called something release quality that wasn't. The 5.3.5 series is based on MySQL or MariaDB 5.2, so it too is based on MySQL 5.1. We've backported a bunch of stuff from MySQL 6. So it's MySQL 5.1, but with some compelling features from 6.0 that we've backported. A lot of the really large optimizer changes that we've been working on will be dropped into the 5.3.5.5 series. One of the big ones is SubQuery optimizations. Your correlated subqueries can now happen. So that took some doing to get those subquery optimizations done, get that through the optimizer team. The 5.6 series is still very, very early development cycle. Like I say, all of our development is open, so I would encourage you to go look at what we have planned. All of the plans are online on our knowledge base. The feature roadmap is still incomplete, so if there's something you need or want or have to have in MariaDB, get in now. File a feature request. Get a work log item created for it. Because early enough in the cycle, that's when you can really affect what goes on. Once we start, and I say we, it's not just Monty Program, but the community of external developers around it. Once we start really working on things, we try not to add features too much to it. So 5.3, 5.5, if you have an itch you need to scratch, it's probably a little too late. It's not too late with the 5.6 series. So first I want to go over some of the things that I call this MariaDB incremental, some of the things we work on with every release we do, regardless of what it's based on. Obviously, first we have to branch off the MySQL community server code. So which branch do we, or which version do we use is always a question. In the case of 5.3, 5.5, we backported a bunch of stuff from MySQL 6.0. So what backports are we going to do? Melding of patches. There were patches for MySQL created by Mark Callahan's team at Google when he was back at Google that floated around the community for years and were never incorporated into the main trunks of MySQL. We got those done within the first 3 months of the company being in business. Because if it's good for Google, it's probably good for other people too. So what are we going to meld? Whose patches are we going to meld first? What are we going to prioritize for this release? That's a discussion that goes on, and it's something that we work on every release. And Percona falls in that too. One of our releases has Percona's user stats patch. So one of the conversations for that release was, is this the release where we meld Percona's user stats patch in? The answer was yes, so we did it. Obviously, MySQL is a big upstream. There are major upstream. Obviously, bug fixes, something we do every single release. We always want to release, the project always wants to have fewer bugs rather than more. So getting total bug count down is a high priority. Early in the life cycle of the project and the company, the build system needed real help. And we tasked my colleague Christian Nielsen with the job of creating a build system that was easily replicable by people outside the company, that was 100% based on free software, so anyone could run it, and that's been done. However, refinements to that build system happen all the time. So, I mean, there are obviously some corner cases. I'm not sure we even have an HPPA build machine. Who knows if we get HP build systems, are they going to react to is there something in our build bot that doesn't react well on an HP architecture? We don't know. So that will require, if it comes up, it will require maintenance and incremental improvements throughout the release cycle, regardless of what point release we're talking about. Ports, packages, and repositories, making sure that we're in as many ports and package trees for the BSDs and as many package systems and software repositories for Debian, Red Hat, SUSE, all the major distributions. Making sure that those packages work as expected. Following the Debian packaging guidelines in the case of Debian packages, making sure that those packages meet the Debian packaging spec. That's big, and it needs to happen with every release we do. We've been working a lot on the Windows user experience, creating a native .msi installer, having that installer be aware of whether or not MySQL is already installed on that system, and if it is, prompting the user how they want to handle that. Just improving overall the Windows user experience. It was a big, MySQL and then Sun like to say that Windows downloads were always the largest number of downloads from their download system. Well, that's pretty self-evident because if you're a Debian user, you don't get MySQL from the download site, you get it from apt. But it doesn't mean that Windows users are a minority, always will be, and they don't matter. The numbers are still huge. A lot of people use Windows to develop software around MySQL. They may not use Windows as a server platform in deployment, but the laptop they develop on runs Windows. And if your Windows experience sucks, well, you've just lost all those potential developers. So we really want to make sure that Windows users have the best experience possible. My colleague Vlad Ventrub is the one working on Windows user experience stuff, and it's really come a long way, especially with some recent releases where our MSI installer has improved dramatically. We've also been working on our Knowledgebase. It's accessible at kb.askmonty.org. There's no reason to remember that. It's on a slide at the end for you. But that Knowledgebase is meant to be a completely open platform where anybody can ask questions, where anybody can volunteer their expertise. If there's a part of MySQL that most people don't touch, it's sort of off on a fringe, it's a very low use case, and you happen to know it cold, backwards and forwards, please come write a Knowledgebase article about it so that other people don't have to do the research you did to teach yourself this. What we'd like to create is a way for people new to the MySQL ecosystem to get ramped up and get their questions answered as quickly as possible so that the database is a transparent thing in the server closet, which is really what it should be. So these are the sort of things that we work on continuously, independent of what the release cycle is, what we forked from the community server of MySQL, what point release we're working on. We always sort of handle these issues and make sure these are addressed. Now for features that are actually release dependent. You can't see the title. This is for MariaDB 5.1. These are some of the features that we first debuted in the 5.1 series of MariaDB. As I said, we don't use InnoDB. We use ExtraDB from Percona. You don't have to change any of your code. Anytime your code references InnoDB, MariaDB will know to use ExtraDB. So if you're already using InnoDB, you don't have to go futzing with things to make MariaDB work. But Percona's ExtraDB is a fantastic engine. We have a really nice relationship with Percona. They're very responsive to bugs. It's very easy to pull ExtraDB source when we need to. The barrier to getting ExtraDB into MariaDB was much lower than InnoDB. It just was easier. It was easier for us, and so we're hoping it's easier for you. We also include other storage included other storage engines in the 5.1 release. Federated X was in 5.1. The Maria engine, which we've since renamed the Aria engine to avoid confusion between Maria the engine and MariaDB the server. PBXT was also included in 5.1. We had a patch for pool of threads, which I'll go into in a little more depth in a little bit. But now you can actually determine how many threads MySQLD is going to use to handle queries, and you can define that, sort of conserve or monitor your resources better. We did huge improvements to our test suite, our automated test suite. That in the build system, if going forward, those things needed to be in place for every point release. So we spent a lot of time doing those test suite improvements so that testing became much easier, both for us inside Monty program and people in the community. You need, if you have a production deployment and you depend on your database server, you want to test things very, 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 very carefully before you roll them into deployment. We want to make sure that you can use our test suite to do that, and you don't have to recreate the wheel every time you want to run a test case in your business. Windows binaries we had as of 5.1. And then we also have the libmysql DSO shared library. That shared object, to be honest, it was developed for Amarok. Amarok wants to use the client library to store data about your audio files. So we worked closely with the Amarok project to make that happen, because Amarok is a kick-butt music player, and we want to make sure they do well. Then MariaDB 5.2 All of the features you saw in the 5.1 slide, of course, you'll be able to find in 5.2, so the pool of threads is going to be there. In addition, the Percona user stats package. We got that in so that MariaDB users can use that to track statistics of what their users are doing. It's a fantastic patch from Percona. We debuted virtual columns, the ability to use virtual columns so that your queries don't have to traverse everything trying to find the data you're looking for. We integrated the OQ graph and the Sphinx SE storage engines. If you're doing search on your site and your site is MySQL or MariaDB powered, Sphinx SE gives you the ability to do full text search not only of the pages on your site but of your database as well. Really, really compelling if you need to do search. Look at Sphinx if you're doing it. The ARIA engine now has group commit abilities. That was debuted in 5.2. We backported the lib services from MySQL 5.5 to MariaDB 5.2. It was a feature that a lot of people had asked for, and a lot of community people had filed work logs about and sent email about. So we decided that for this particular feature, we'll actually pull that out of the MySQL source code and backport it because so many people were interested in it. This is the type of thing that I was saying earlier. If there's a feature you really want, make sure that you fill out a feature request because we do listen. And we're an open project, so if we don't listen and you can do the work yourself, well, do the work yourself, push it at us, and tell us next time you'd like us to do it. We also have a pluggable, an API for pluggable authentication. This means that if you want to authenticate users via Kerberos or LDAP or some other authentication mechanism other than the grant tables, you can now use this API to write a plugin that will authenticate users using a different methodology. Talk about that in a bit as well. I'll also be talking about the segmented key cache for MyISAM. Key caches can now be segmented so that when you have need to go through the key cache and look at it, you don't have to lock the entire key cache. You can just lock that one page where the data resides that you need to investigate. Now on to 5.3.5.5, which, as I said, have not been released yet. We're hoping for a beta cycle this quarter. But here are some of the features we have coming in 5.3.5.5. The big one is dynamic columns. I believe it's Timur that's been working a lot on dynamic columns. But the ability to just create columns on the fly. Done more work on the subquery cache for 5.3.5.5. We've got a plugin for handler socket. Multi-read range and batch key access. If you're doing a lot of joins in your database, that multi-read range and batch key access is going to blow you away. What this does for joins is just incredible. Continued work on hash joins. So as I said, we have a lot of people from the optimizer team, so you can see them going through and looking at stuff people have been complaining about for a while and getting some of these things fixed. And group commit in the bin log. These are all coming, like I say, knock wood, sometime in the next month. I'd say 30 to 90 days for a beta cycle, 90 days being extremely pessimistic. That pessimism in New York. Who's pessimistic in New York? And now on to 5.6. As I said, this is really, really, really early in the release cycle. The feature roadmap is anything but complete. There's still a chance for people in the community to affect this. Our big work here, it's a wish list. Monty will tell you it's happening, it's going to happen. Don't worry about it, it's happening. I am a pessimist. Kind of show me, but we're working on GIS improvements. Getting GIS done for MySQL. It's an area that MySQL has lagged far behind Postgres in a lot of ways. There are some people out there, let's see, OpenStreetMap uses MySQL. And to do their GIS work, they have to pipe all their results from MySQL out to Postgres, and it's driving them crazy. And if they're doing it, other people are doing it. So we realized that GIS is something that's needed to come to MySQL for a while, so it's going to come to MariaDB. We have a developer hired solely to work on GIS implementation. Like I say, I have hope. I don't know if it's going to make it into 5.6. I don't know what the quality will be. I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. I'd rather do it the reverse. So Monty will tell you this will be the best thing since slice spread for GIS users. I'll say if you need GIS data, take a long look at MariaDB 5.6 when it's released and see if the features that you need are already there. We'll see. But we will be hopefully OpenGIS compliant, and we'll have a GIS optimizer. We're working seriously on replication, improving replication for MariaDB 5.6, better monitoring and statistics tools. The Percona user stats patch is, as I said, is something that a lot of people really wanted to see, and that clued us in that monitoring and statistics generation is something that people would really like to have without paying a ton of money to Oracle to get those tools. So we'll try to get your back and provide you with those tools for free. Intel has provided us with hardware which will allow us to test out performance on Intel machines with greater than 16 cores. Right now, it's a strange situation. Almost the more cores you have on the Intel architecture, once you get above 12 to 16 cores, your performance can actually begin to degrade over time. And that's something that we're trying to figure out why this is happening. Intel wants to know too, obviously. And so that's a priority for this release cycle, is to make sure that multi-core support, especially high multi-core, right? I'm not talking, a Core 2 Duo laptop. I'm talking a 32 CPU server machine. Making sure that that performs as you'd expect a 32-core machine to perform as opposed to an 8-core machine. We'll also have a full-text search engine plugin. This will allow you to do full-text searches, engine independent. So full-text search will not be limited to my ISAM anymore. That's pretty good news. And then that URL I have down at the bottom is a URL to our Knowledgebase page on what our plans for 5.6 are. That page is editable. You can write comments. If there's something you'd like to see, this is the place to do it. Discuss it there, start a thread on a mailing list, come grab someone on IRC. But our plans for 5.6 are not made by Monty Program. Sure, some of them are, right? We're driving the project forward, we say, and so in order to do that, we have to come up with some, features we're going to implement. But the community is responsible too. If you don't speak up and say there's a feature I need or a feature I want and it's really important and this is why, we're not going to know about it, so we don't know how to prioritize it. So get involved with the development process, because you really can shape the development process and drive the project in directions you'd like to see it go for your deployment. So now, depending on, let's just have a quick time check. Okay, I've got about 15 minutes. So I'd just like to quickly go through a couple of the features I mentioned earlier, let you know how they work, where you can find them, why you'd want to implement them. First one I'm going to do is pool of threads. This was available in MariaDB 5.1, so it's available in both 5.1 and 5.2 releases, including point releases. What it introduces is a DBA-defined number of reusable threads. So basically, you as a DBA can say, I want this many threads to handle queries in my database, no more, no less. If you have lots and lots and lots of very, very short-running queries, and you're not locking rows or tables all over the place, this pool of threads can be a huge win for you, because you're not those threads aren't waiting for someone to release the lock. Those threads aren't sitting around waiting for another thread to finish before they start. In order to use this, you need to when you compile MariaDB, you need to use this configure argument with libevent. MariaDB is compiled. Our binaries do have that flag by default. So if you're downloading our binaries, the with libevent flag is already there. This feature introduces 2 new arguments to your my.conf server configuration. First, you have to tell MySQLD that you want to handle threads with the pool of threads patch. And then you have to tell it how many threads to use, determined by thread pool size. The argument there is between 0 and 64 threads. 0 will drop you right back to the old behavior. 1 isn't meant to be used in production. It starts a single thread. You're not going to want to do that. And then you're up to 64 threads that you can use to handle your queries. Knowing that some people would probably type 12 threads and actually need 13, we opened another port because if the thread count goes up to your maximum, you're not going to be able to connect to the server to shut it down or to find out what's going on. Right? Those threads have locked you out of your own server. So we did open an extra port so that in case you have thread saturation, you can get another way into your server to kill off threads, figure out what's going on, increase your thread count. So make sure that if you are going to use pool of threads, that in your my.conf you do open that extra port. If you do it, you'll never need it. If you forget, the very first time you use pool of threads, it'll saturate your thread pool and you'll be looking for work. At least my karma's like that. Another feature, segmented key cache. I kind of touched on this earlier. That's available in MariaDB 5.2. So no longer, if you use segmented key cache, no longer will you have thread contentions trying to get the mutex to read my ISAM tables or my ISAM key caches. Instead, you can page out your key cache to individual pages and just query that one page, so that that thread has a mutex lock on a single page, but it doesn't have a mutex lock on the entire key cache. If you're already using key caches, not the segmented key cache, but you're already using key caching with my ISAM, your other variables will still apply. Right? Again, key cache segments 0 to 64. 1's not used because why would you, I mean, a one-page key cache segment, that's the same as a single key cache. So 1 isn't used. And then if you want statistics on what's going on with your segmented key cache, in the information schema database, you'll find the key caches that will tell you all about how that's working. So if you're using my ISAM and you're using key caching and you're finding that that mutex lock is degrading performance because things are sitting around waiting for that lock to be released, this segmented key cache is important news for you. Next feature, pluggable authentication, which I sort of touched on before. That's available in MariaDB 5.2. As of MariaDB 5.2, all user authentication, all of it, even traditional user authentication, is done by means of plugins. What that means is you can now use the syntax when creating users, how to identify them. In this case, MySQL native password, that type is the same as the traditional identified by password. That plugin for authentication is included with MariaDB by default. So the default behavior on authenticating users works exactly as you'd expect, and the plugin is already there for you to use. So really, you won't see any changed behavior. There are new features available to you. We have one other plugin that's used just for testing. The only other plugin we include that may actually be of interest is the socket peer cred. What that allows is if your user is already identified and logged into the operating system, their operating system credentials can be passed via Unix socket to the database. Which means that using socket peer cred, when you want to create a new database user, just give them a login on the Unix machine and you're done. You don't have to give them a login and then a MySQL account as well. They can use their Unix credentials to log into the database. And this pluggable authentication is an API. It's a plugin. As I said, it's all handled by plugins. Anybody can develop external plugins. So how do you want to authenticate users? Oracle has Active Directory authentication. You know how they get it? Our pluggable authentication API. Oracle uses our pluggable authentication API to give Active Directory support to MySQL Enterprise. So I guess it's up to us to rewrite the Active Directory plugin, unless you want to pay Oracle. But yeah, find your itch and scratch it. I know a lot of people have asked about LDAP. If you're doing LDAP authentication, write us an LDAP plugin, please. Or sponsor the work. But no longer is authentication to MySQL have to be sort of out on the fringe in its own world. You're now able to authenticate users with a single sign-on and give them database access, in addition to access to their shell and their email and other things. Virtual columns, another new feature available in MariaDB 5.2. We have two types of virtual columns. We have persistent. Those are actually stored in the database. Those virtual columns are actually created, stored, and are rereadable later. Then we have generated virtual types of columns. Those are generated on the fly as they're needed and discarded when not necessary anymore. In your virtual columns, your triggers, stored procedures, all the things you'd expect to find in a column, those will work with virtual columns. They're all supported in virtual columns as well. Indices, indexes, however you want to call it, I put that in as a caveat. You know, some people like to say, oh, this works like a dream. Me, I come from a sysadmin background, and I like people to tell me when there are gotchas. Careful with indices with virtual columns. They're mostly supported. You shouldn't find anything that's going to kill you, but you may find some strange behavior. Now, MariaDB is certainly not the first SQL database out there to support virtual columns. Microsoft SQL Server product has supported virtual columns for years. However, there's some pretty heavy constraints when you use virtual columns with SQL Server. Pretty heavy constraints. And we've tried to remove some of those for virtual columns in MariaDB. Two examples right here. Float expressions. Forget it in SQL Server. You can't put a float expression in a virtual column. Won't happen. Server and user variables. Also, SQL Server can't happen. Just not supported. In MariaDB's virtual columns implementation, you can actually use those. So here are some URLs you might be interested in before you start frantically typing. Let me get to my very final slide, but I'll just run over them quickly. Launchpad is what we use for code hosting, just like MySQL does, and our bug tracking. The first one is a link to the actual project, and then the two other ones are two Launchpad groups. If you've never used Launchpad, when you join a group, there's usually a mailing list associated with it, and that's true in both of these cases. So if you join the Maria Developers group on Launchpad, you'll be subscribed to the Maria Developers mailing list. If you just join Maria Discuss, you'll be automatically signed up for the Maria Discuss mailing list. I would hope the names are fairly self-explanatory. If you're just a user, you probably don't want to sign up for Maria Developers. You'll see Monty program employees, throwing rotten fruit at each other as we scream about who's going to handle what bug and whose fault that bug is. We also have other mailing lists. We have a very, very low traffic announce list, just telling you when new releases are available. That's at list.askmonty.org. Our wiki, we're trying to fold up in favor of the Knowledgebase, but it's still available. But preferably you'll use the Knowledgebase at kb.askmonty.org. Our download site, right there for binaries. Of course, if you're using Linux BSD, check ports, packages, and your binary repositories before you come downloading from us. All IRC channels are open. We use Freenode, #Maria. Our work log is open. You can file work log requests for features you'd like to see. And our build bot is also open. So if you'd like to run a build instance for us and help us produce binaries, great. If you'd like to run a build bot instance inside your company just to check and see what's going on with nightlies and are things compiling cleanly, and this next release of MariaDB, can I trust it? You can do that internally. It's very important to us that everything we do is easily replicated by anybody outside of Monty Program. If there's something we can do inside Monty Program as relates to development, deployment, or discussion, and you can't do it yourself, we've failed in some way, and I want to know about it. So before I get to questions, I'm actually going to skip to this slide. I haven't made it accessible yet. I'm going to do that as soon as I finish, but this presentation is a publicly accessible Google Doc. You could go back and click on all the links that were in that, so you don't have to write anything down. You do want to make a note of that URL, because that will get you to this presentation. That having been said, any questions about MariaDB, what we're working on, how we're working on it, what we're doing, why we're doing it? I answered everything. Ah, monsieur. Yes. Yeah, the plan is those GIS improvements will go into the will be targeted at the ARIA storage engine. Yes, the ARIA storage engine is a replacement for MyISAM, but with transactions. So that's the plan right now. Of course, things may change. As I said, OpenGIS is slated for the 5.6 release, and things are anything but firm there. So if you think I'm standing up here and smoking crack and we should not be doing this with the ARIA storage engine, let us know. If you have a better idea, please let us know. We want to know about it. If we're making mistakes or some for more than just people in this room. Any other questions? Yes. The plan was originally that MariaDB 5.6 would be based on 5.5. With the advent of 6.0, that kind of got thrown up in the air. It's hard to say. I'm not sure whether or not we'll use 5.5 or jump straight to 6.0. With our 5.6 release. We backported stuff from 6.0 to the 5.2 series. The 5.3 and 5.5 series are going to be based on 5.2, which is in turn based on MySQL 5.1 with backports. But with MariaDB 5.6, our base is still up in the air. We're, 5.5, 6.0. We have half the company on one side of the fence, half on the other. And I think what it really comes down to in the end is which side of the fence is Monty on, because that side of the fence always seems to win. Yeah. Yeah. It should be one or the other. I don't see us doing another release based on 5.1. Anything else? All right, two of them. Duke it out. Show the pre... Oh, yeah. Sure. There you are. And there was another question back there. So the commercial support model. So, as I said, Monty Program has hired a lot of the developers from former MySQL. We haven't hired support people because Monty Program's not a support organization, and we don't want to be. We don't want to be everything to everybody. So if you came to Monty Program and said, I have a deployment of MySQL and I need first, second, and third level support, we'd say, well, we're interested in your third level support. We can write custom code for you to fix bugs for you or write features, but first and second level, we don't do. Have you spoken to one of our partners like SkySQL? For performance tuning, have you spoken to a partner of ours like Percona? SkySQL will come in and give you that first and second level support, and they'll partner with us behind the scenes for that third level. So they'll get you through first and second level support, and when you hit an actual bug in the software, your company will never have to contact Monty Program. SkySQL or Percona or whoever will do that for you. They'll contact Monty program through back channels. We'll write the bug fix, push it to Sky. Sky sends it to you. So we have support is something we'd like to farm out for partners and focus on what we do well, which is development. Anything else? So the obligatory slide. Thanks to everyone for coming here. Thank you very, very much to Percona for inviting us, and me in particular. If you got to know me better, you'd know why inviting me to a conference is a very big deal. Most people are really wary of doing it, so cheers to Percona for that. And at the after event tonight, I'm going to have salmiakki kosu, which is Finnish black vodka, licorice-flavored vodka. I probably shouldn't have given it away. It's straight up 80 proof vodka, and it only tastes like black licorice. So Americans tend to think it's Jägermeister, do 5 shots before Monty tells them what's happening and then laughs at them. So I've sort of given it away. Be aware that I'm going to be serving very 80 proof black vodka at the event tonight. And thanks for your attention. It was really, really nice talking to you. And hopefully you know a little bit more about MariaDB. Your interest is piqued and you'll go out there and give it a look. Thanks very much.